Well, hello everyone. Welcome back to All Things Avennia. Thank you so much for joining us again today, April 29th. Today is actually a very special day for me personally because this marks the 2 week grace period after my second vaccine shot to mean that I have immunity and we are vaccinated and ready to go. So it's been a very exciting day here at the Avennia family. A lot of our other employees got vaccinated, I guess 5 weeks ago or 6 weeks ago as well. Um, so all is good. But today I'm super excited to have a very special guest here to talk to us about food and wine pairing. So we are coming up on a new release, a new summer release this weekend with our new white wines, the Oliane and Le Perle, both 2019, and then our 2020 Rosé, the L'Égerie Rosé. And I thought, when we first launched All Things Avennia and talked about what things you were interested in hearing more about, food and wine pairing was one of the ones that you wanted to learn more about. And I instantly thought that, there's no one else in the industry I look up to more when it comes to food and wine pairing or this idea than
And
my
Mario Lopez.
boss, than Mario Lopez, which is also my old boss, Chris Horn. I'm so happy to
Oh, I
introduce
was your boss at one point? I
you. Were
guess so. Technically. Never really felt like that, though. You never did anything I asked you to do.
It's true. So this is Chris Horn. Everyone, welcome to Chris Horn.
Hi,
He
I'll scroll through and see everybody's faces. Hi. Hi there. Hello there. Hi. Are we all over the world here? Renee's walking around somewhere. Where are you at, Renee? Oh, that looks like all right.
She's muted
New
right
York, and I'm on my way home, and I didn't want to miss this.
Okay, great. Say hi to the East Coast for me. That's great.
Chris, we have people here from New York City. I see some Vermont folk. I see some Washington D.C., Northern Virginia folk. There's people from all over here that are ready to see this conversation. So Chris, I wanted to, before I met you, you had much experience and you had a whole life in the wine industry before I ran into you. So I was hoping that
Are
you
you
could.
calling me old Eli?
No, not at all.
Okay,
Not
just checking.
at all. But I was hoping you could let people know some about your background. So sort of like
Oh,
why are you in the wine industry? What brought you into this industry to begin?
well, I got the wine bug. I mean, I sort of got it in college because I drank a lot of jugs of Carlo Rossi Hardy Burgundy, but it wasn't until a bottle of 85 Brunello from Banffy at this little Italian restaurant I was busting tables at after college that I was like, oh man, wine is something else. It's not Carlo Rossi Hardy Burgundy. It's something different entirely. And so I sort of started the expedition there, and I spent some years working at a seafood joint under a really talented and humble wine guy, Tim O'Brien, over at Salties on Alki. And then I spent 6 years working at Wild Ginger, playing with some really amazing food, very challenging food from a pairing perspective. And then almost 16 years ago, I opened Purple Cafe downtown Seattle and have been with the group ever since. And yeah, do you want to hear the story about how I screwed it up
Oh,
that one
absolutely.
time?
I think that's
Okay. Yeah. So this is the most important thing is that we were opening in June of 2006, and we had a huge menu, tasting menu, and we wanted to have everything paired. And so, when you're opening a restaurant, it's a mess. I don't even know why we try, but like the food's not here and the menu's not done, and I don't have all the wines. And so I kind of went through and did what fancy wine people do all the time, which is guess. And I would be working with Asian food, like I could guess this stuff pretty easy. And so, I mean, I'm sure a lot of it was okay, except for the white Spanish anchovies paired with a 2005 Chenin Blanc from Stellenbosch. Um, the general manager at the time came up to me. He's like, "Hey, Warren, did you try that pairing with the thing?" And I was like, "No, but I'm sure it's amazing because I'm amazing. I'm a smart wine person." And then after work, I sat down, poured myself some wine, swirled it. It was like, "Oh, I'm fancy." And then I had the dish, and so sometimes when we talk about food and wine pairing, we talk about like, is it a handshake or is it a hug? Sometimes the pairing is they just get along really well. I mean, they work. It's like they're co-workers and they're very effective. And then sometimes it's a little more passionate. It's a hug. Sometimes we even take that metaphor a little bit too far. But this pairing was like it took the fresh, salty Spanish anchovy, oh sorry, sardine, and turned it into like old rotten fish, like slathered with garbage. Like it was the worst combination of flavors that have ever happened on the planet. And I was responsible for that because I'm a smart sommelier and I guessed. And so I can't imagine how many people came in the restaurant, like had that pairing, was like, oh, this is gross. Something's gross. The food's gross. The wine's gross. Everything's gross. And so from then on, we said we'll never guess again. No more guessing. If you're going to put a food and wine pairing on a menu, it has to be it has to be done in the mouth. And it wasn't just my mouth, but we endeavored to have the chef team and the wine team tasting together so that there could be consensus about the correctness of a pairing. And sometimes, you know, there would be slight disagreements, but it made the wine list better. It made the food better. It made me think about wine as a tool rather than just a thing. And that's the sound of the hot water heater. We knew that was going to happen here at the palatial office. Here, there we go. See, it's over. Anyway, so yeah, it was decided then and there that we'd never guess again, because guessing is the first step in food and wine pairing, but in a lot of places it's the only step, and we just want to be different.
Right, for sure. So you this is at Purple and everything. So you said you worked at Wild Ginger and Alki and Salty Stone Alki and some other like experience in the restaurant or wine industry in general. When was it that you actually started, like, because I'm sure it happened before Purple, that you started paying attention to food and wine and how they combine together into something new and something different?
I think I did kind of, God, that hot water is going to drive me crazy. I think I did start paying attention when I was bussing tables at that Italian place. Because every night after work, there would be, you know, they'd sit you down, and part of being paid was that you eat some food, some free food, and have some free wine. And I just kind of was like, wow, everything, it just makes everything taste better when you have the right liquid with the right solid. And so it sort of started there. And then, you know, think about, this is back in the mid 90s, and cuisine and wine, especially in the Northwest, had not really caught up with Europe yet. We didn't have sommeliers in Seattle in 1995. You had a beverage director. We didn't have people walking around with pins on their lapels, and so it was a little nebulous at that time. I knew that I wanted a job in wine, but I didn't. At that point, there weren't a lot of great opportunities, or there wasn't a great demand for sommeliers. It wasn't really a thing back in the mid 90s, unless you worked at a fancy French place on the Upper West Side of Manhattan.
Yeah.
Did I answer that, or did?
No, that's totally it. So then when you were brought on at Purple Cafe and Wine Bar, and this is, so for those of you that don't know, Purple Cafe was actually started in Woodinville. So Woodinville, which is where our winery is located, up in sort of a suburb of the Seattle area. And that was the very beginning of Heavy Restaurant Group's family of restaurants. But the Purple Cafe and Wine Bar in downtown Seattle was a big deal. It was a really prime location, and they brought Chris Horn in to do the wine list, to do the wine program. And I believe you were the AGM at the time. Is that true, Chris?
Yeah, that was bonkers.
Yeah, so the assistant general manager of operations for the restaurant as well. But you had decided that this place, Purple Cafe and Wine Bar, was going to be a place where people could actually experience food and wine in maybe a totally different way that they would have experienced had they gone to another restaurant. I want to hear a little bit more about the first couple of years at Purple, and then how you end up meeting Coach and the head chef, and sort of how your relationship started, because that's going to bring us to the book that I want to talk a little bit about.
Right. So chef was the sous chef at the time, and so, you know, I'm in a new job. I'm trying to do my best thing. I'm walking around, and he's like looking at who's the guy with the tie and the computer. Oh, that's the wine person. And chef had spent some time teaching culinary school, and part of teaching culinary school was teaching food and wine pairings, actually. So he was interested in wine way before I met him. And it was after maybe a few years of pairing food and wine together, doing dinners offsite for private clients. It was after one of those morning shows where we were half drunk at 11 a.m., where we went to a bar called, or a restaurant called Tanaka-san, and had a bunch of food and maybe a few beers, and we're like, we're smart people. We should write a book about the thing we love the most, which is food and wine pairing. And we sat down and we hashed it out. And the book that we were going to write was going to be so boring, like excruciatingly boring. And so we kind of sat in that space for a while where we just talked about it a lot until both our wives were like, oh my God, could you guys please stop talking about this book that you haven't written yet? Just either write it or never speak of it again. We're tired of you guys. And so we sat in the backyard and we're like, okay, what do we want to do? What do we want people to actually know about food and wine? And we use this sort of to advocate an approach to having wine be part of your life without being a jerk. How to have wine be a natural thing in your refrigerator or in your closet. Like, always have it around, because we eat every day. Most of us drink a little every day. And so why wouldn't we want it to be the best possible combination every time? And so we developed this idea of having a wine wardrobe where you just always have certain wines around the house that, regardless of what you're having for dinner, there's something that you can grab that will work. And then you just kind of treat those wines sort of like you treat the salad dressing. When you run out, you get another one. And actually take wine off the pedestal that we tend to put it on from time to time, and make it an everyday thing rather than this special occasion. And I think that the more you pay attention to food and wine interaction, you will naturally get better at it. Like, it's not, I'm not a rocket scientist. I'm not any kind of scientist, but I've just been paying attention to the interaction between food and wine for a couple decades now. Wow, I am old. Anyway, let's talk about something other than my age, Eli.
Well, no, it's funny. I'm glad you said this because one of the things for me personally, so when I moved to Seattle in 2013, I started working at Purple Cafe. I met you, I met Tyler, I met the wine team, and started interacting with wine in general, but with the wine industry in a completely different way than I had been. Which is, like you said, like they're coming into it, there is a lot of pretension. There's a lot of you know, elitism in wine in general. And for the first time, you were instrumental in me appreciating wine for the beverage that it is, for the part of humanity that it is, and for just like the everyday convenience that it can be for part of your culinary wardrobe, or like wardrobe, like you said. And so like first of all, I am so grateful that you were part of that part of my life and my trajectory. But what's cool is that you guys did write this book, and this is the book. So for those of you that don't have it, or if you haven't seen it, this is Cookin' Cork with the famous Chris Horn.
Hey, look at that.
There you go. A couple of people have it. Chris Horn and Coach Chef Harry Mills that wrote this just amazing book. And I think what makes it amazing isn't just the actual facts, science, the proof that in the pudding for food and wine pairings, but also your attitude about it. And it's something I've always really appreciated is the how you talk about wine, how you approach the whole subject is something that everyone can get on board with and everyone can get behind.
I think it was always interesting to me that historically, the person that grows the grapes is probably the most important person. The second most important person is the winemaker. And the least important person is the person that pulls the cork. And yet that was the guy that was always snooty about it. I never understood that. Like, right. I do nothing in my life. I'm basically worthless. This pandemic taught me that. I think that
because I don't know anyone. You also said in the book how incredibly stressful it is to open a restaurant, and like no one should go through the opening a restaurant experience. And yet I feel like this last year you probably felt like you were opening a restaurant for a good 8-9 months straight.
Every week felt different. And actually we opened here at Purple Cafe downtown a week ago, and it's bonkers. I'm too old for this crap.
Yeah.
But yeah, I guess the thing I did miss during the pandemic is having people actually react to what's happening. So I did like some Zoom classes and stuff, but like everybody's muted. I can't tell if they're laughing and going, "Who's this jerk?" And at least in a restaurant, you can walk around and see that people are smiling and enjoying themselves. And if it had something to do with it, it's the thing that we live for as hospitalitarians. It's a real word,
It is.
hospitalitarian.
It is. Yeah. Well, that's great. So I'm really glad that you did write this book. I've been reading through the book, really for the last year or two, but also recently just to like catch up. And there's so much great information in it, but also information that I think is super approachable for any type of person. But one of the main points that you make in this book, and something I think it would be worth talking about a little bit, is the idea of mind mouth. And it's something that people often talk about mind's eye, or like other senses that are perceived through the brain in some way. But mind mouth, I thought, was a really interesting way to describe how any person will perceive wine and food and wine pairing when you approach something like food and wine pairing. So can you just sort of like summarize what mind mouth is before we start getting into these wines and talking about it on a more level?
Yeah. So like I oftentimes use the analogy of music and wine being similar. And so if I said, can you in your head right now play the guitar solo from Hotel California? I bet the vast majority of the people watching this can probably do that because you've memorized that music. Or just take any music that you love. You don't need to turn on the radio to hear music. It's in your head. And it's only because we're perceiving it in a way that is positive and joyful and repetitive. So, that's how we memorize things. And we do that with food, but we tend to ignore those things. I mean, I bet you can probably catalog what your favorite burger is. I was just at In-N-Out a week ago. I stopped doing the double double. I feel like it's just too much meat. The single animal style is good enough for me. Anyway,
Yeah.
we memorize our favorite flavors of things, but we don't really think about. I mean, if I said chocolate chip cookie, you could taste it. Or if I said ripe orange, you could taste it. And so we do have the ability to catalog and memorize all these things. It's just that we don't bother, or it's just not a thing that we naturally do. And so it's talking about the mind mouth is like everybody does it, everybody can do it. It's just a matter of repetition and just like plugging into it a little more. Like instead of just washing down that ribeye with that California Cabernet, actually think about what is happening in your mouth and what the wine is doing to the food and the interaction that happens there. I think we all eat, we all drink, but it's not until we stop and start paying attention to what's actually happening in our mouths and recording that, pressing the record button on those experiences, that we can start building into like, oh, when I have this particular dish, I like to have this particular wine. Why is that? Well, once you sort of fill in the why, you can do that with other things too. And in the book, I get to the point where I recommend, like, when you set out to do a recipe, try to like read the recipe, try to taste the food before you make it, and then pick out the wine that you want to taste with that food, and you'll get close. And sometimes you'll nail it and feel like a total stud.
Yeah, totally. Well, I thought it was interesting that in the book you say, that we as people will have consumed approximately 20,000 meals in our life up to the point where we're legally allowed to drink. And so that experience alone gives us that catalog, gives us that experience with flavor and with texture and with identifying what food means to us or what flavors mean to us that we can use while we approach wine in the same way. Because I think wine, it's easy to be intimidated by wine and to say something like, oh, I don't know anything about wine. How could I even approach food and wine pairing or something like that? When in reality, we've been preparing for it our whole lives and gaining and getting that information onto our palate and in our brain.
It's interesting. Like sometimes there'll be a home repair. I'm not handy. I'm the least handy person in the world. But sometimes there'll be a home repair. Like I think I can watch a YouTube video and figure this out. I can replace a toilet.
Right.
It was a total fail. I had to end up calling a plumber, but I had the hubris to try. But replacing a toilet is hard. Eating is pretty easy, and tasting is pretty easy. And so I think that taking the lock off wine knowledge and letting everybody just enjoy is kind of the crusade.
Totally. Well, okay, so then let's put your experience to test here. So you
You didn't
have
say there was going to be a test. You said
there's
no
there's
test.
there's definitely does. So part of what we're doing today is we're celebrating and we're just talking about our newest releases here at Avennia. So our Oliane Sauvignon Blanc 2019. We have our 2019 La Pearl, which is a Roussan Marsan blend that we've been making, and then our Rosé, a 2020 Rosé made from Grenache and Mourvedre. And my hope here is that that Chris and I could be able to taste these wines, maybe talk about the wine, what it means to us as far as flavor profile, and then what we would be thinking or what Chris would be thinking about as far as the kinds of food you'd want to pair it with, or how we would even approach this wine as far as food and wine pairing. So, Chris,
Yeah.
I think.
What do you want to start with?
Well, I'm tempted to start with rosé just because it's 2020,
Mhm.
but I feel like food wise, maybe would you want to start with the Oliane Sauv Blanc?
Yeah.
Okay, let's start with the Oliane. So this is the 2019 Oliane Sauvignon Blanc.
Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about the winemaking. What's the use of oak and whatnot?
So this is 2019 Oliane Sauv Blanc. So this is uh it's 100% Sauvignon Blanc from two different vineyards, from Boucher and Red Willow Vineyard. The bulk of this is fermented in neutral barrel. So there's no new oak. There's nothing to put oak flavoring in it. But there is a proportion of concrete egg fermentation as well. So this is, I believe it's 25% concrete fermented. The rest is neutral barrel.
Right.
So what it does, and we aged on the lees for about 7 months, so it has that sort of added richness that you might not get from some other Sauvignon Blancs.
Mhm.
But there's still a lot of acidity. There's a lot of freshness. This particular vintage, 2019, I guess for Washington was a slightly cooler vintage. I will say that with quotation marks. It's only 12.8% alcohol, so it is on the leaner side, I think, of Washington white wines. But yeah, that's the Oliane, the 2019 Oliane.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
What are some of your initial reactions?
All right. It is a lot livelier and brighter and citruser. That's not a word. Than maybe some of the prior vintages. Like it really finishes with that almost lemon pithy, mouth-watering flavors. And so the thing that I think about first is the acidity, and it's in the book, but I'll just do the sidebar on acidity. Mm-hmm. Wine people talk about acidity all the time because it's one of the most important factors in food and wine pairing. If you have a wine that isn't acidic, it's not going to work. And when you have acidity on food, it definitely, you need to have as much acid in the wine or more for things to be successful. And so when I taste this, it's a high acid white. It is a little bit broader on the palate. Hi, how's it going? It's a little broader on the palate because of that. I think the lees kind of give you that. And maybe there's a little oxygen with those older barrels. But I'm thinking of seafoody things. I'm thinking about raw seafoody things. One of my go-tos, as you see on the cover of the book, is oysters and throwing. I would pound some oysters with this. There's quite a bit of acidity in it, and the finish too has a little bit of a brine thing as well. I do ceviche with this. I would do all manner of white fish. I do some linguine with some prawns. Throw in a lot of herbs too, because those herbs will reach out to the bits in the wine. Yeah, actually, linguine, like maybe something really simple. Just like I got a ton of parsley growing. By the way, never plant parsley in your garden because it will take over. I'm thinking about just starting a parsley farm. That would be great. And what I would do to acidulate the food, I would probably just squeeze fresh lime or just do lemon zest on it. So yeah, I do some pasta, some either prawns or crab, whatever looks good, and then a bunch of herbs and some lemon zest. And this wine would probably be fun.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and you talk about this in the book as well, or you or coach or the combination of the two of you, of how when you are making a dish and when you're on purpose trying to pair a wine with a dish, a lot of times you might alter the actual food to make sure that the wine is also shining. And I think what you just said, the fact that you're not necessarily adding lemon juice, you're not adding more acid to the pasta because the wine will take care of that. The wine will take care of that in your mouth. Whereas like lemon zest will spark those notes for you, those lemon notes, and make you think that while getting the acid from the wine. And I think that's because a lot of people I think will just try to make the food the way they want to make a food and then try to find the right wine for it. But there is a lot more interplay between the two.
You have the pH stats on this?
Do I? I do somewhere.
Because
But
I'm finding that my mouth is very active, and heck, you could probably bother a salad with this thing because like it has vinaigrette level acidity in there. Maybe.
totally. No, I don't have because I know we have the TA there somewhere, the TA or total acidity somewhere. I don't have it right now, but you're right. There is quite a bit of acidity. Well, another thing I'd ask you about this one before we move on to the next one is aside from acidity, there is some bitterness there or some pithiness. Like when you were talking about as far as flavor, you said lemon pith. There was almost this
Mhm.
pith. When I think of pith, and that bitterness, that can either come from lees aging, like from the bitterness you might get from yeast, from dead yeast cells, or it's from phenolics, like with certain varieties that have a phenolic character that can add bitterness. When you're thinking about food and bitterness, where does bitterness come through that you want to watch out for in either the food or the wine?
Hmm. I think that bitterness gets a bad rap. I think that bitterness is in my folder labeled mouth drama. And I think that it's the reason we like black coffee and hoppy beer. Like we like to have a little bit of that that tactile reaction to things. Um, but I think you can get go a little over the line with the bitter on bitter action. Like
Yeah,
especially it's the
interaction.
reason why like there are problematic things in the food world like the skin of nuts like walnuts or almonds bitter. You throw something bitter at it and sometimes it just tends to accentuate the bitterness and kind of take over things. But like in my brain, I just maybe put some shaved almonds on that pasta dish that I just made, and I think that might work pretty good. I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's cool. It's always like a tricky thing for me to understand bitterness. Um,
Yeah, I think there's a difference between bitter and sour. I think people have a hard time sometimes talking about those two things.
yeah.
Um,
Is it the kind of thing you add sweet or fat in the food in order to interact with bitter in a way that's more pleasing? Like in the same way that you would add fat to coffee, you would add half and half or whole milk to coffee to counteract that bitterness. Is there something there that you would assume
hmm.
would work well with bitterness?
I think that's why sometimes the the pairing there's different kind of approaches to pairing. You can do uh, sort of mirror pairings where you have richness in food and so you go for richness in wine. Sometimes you can do a contrast pairing where you have richness on the plate but try to get something that's going to get in there and like clean things up. So
Mm,
if I was doing this linguine, I just changed it from pasta to linguine. I decided that that's the pasta we're using now. And if I did add a little bit of butter to that thing, I think that would make the dish pretty dynamic too.
yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Very cool. All right,
Anyway, so did we decide linguine with
with
fresh
prawn.
herbs,
Yeah,
some almond shavings, toasted almond shavings? I'm
parsley,
sorry.
cinnamon, lemon, prawns. I think is what
Hmm.
we're doing.
Yeah.
Love it.
All
That's
right.
great.
Great.
Um, so shall we go to richer style Roussan Marsan, or do you want to go to rosé before we do that?
Uh, let's do the Marsan Roussan.
Great. All right. So now we have another one of our new releases here. This is Le Pearl, the 2019 Le Pearl here, and this is a beautiful 72% Roussan, 28% Marsan. blend from a couple of different vineyards, from Boucher, Weather Eye on Red Mountain, and Sagemore. This does see a little bit of new oak. So when we talk about white wines that are impacted by new oak flavors, from oak barrels that have been charred, that have a little more intensity to them. This has a little bit of that. It also spends a little bit of time in concrete and neutral barrels, so there is some other ways to mitigate the amount of oak impact in the wine. But this is a really fun, a very cool wine, and this is, Chris, 14.2% alcohol. So this is not a shy wine by any means.
I'm gonna pour some more here. Hold on. I think it's delicious.
Yeah, it's great.
Man, I could crush a little bit of this. I'm being a professional and I'm spitting because I'm gonna be on the floor later, and I don't want to be that happy to be here. So I think it's great that these grapes are here. I'm old enough to remember when everybody started hating on Chardonnay because it was fashionable to be negative about Chardonnay. And thank God Viognier and Marsanne and Roussanne came along, because I don't know where we would have found those flavors. So when I think about the grapes of the Rhone Valley, I think about them having a lot of the same flavor profiles as many Chardonnays, but they're just more interesting. It's sort of like there's so many different sort of tropical and stone fruits in these wines, and they're so aromatic. And then you add that toasty oak. It's just a thing that I want to stick my face into as much as I want to have it in my mouth parts. But so oak is one of those things that we argue with a lot, because again, the fastest way to feel like an expert is to be negative about things, chefs. But I think that oak is a wonderful flavor. It brings things like a little vanilla. It brings a little coconut. It sometimes brings some of those baking spices, and like those are all things already in food. What are we upset about? And that toastiness too. Like, so now what I'm doing is I'm thinking about things like brown butter. I'm thinking of things like grill marks on a white fish. Sorry, it's 75 degrees in Seattle, and all I can think about is grilling fish outdoors.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair.
And then the richness of the mouth too. Like I'm gonna throw some butter on this as well, or some sort of fattiness, or maybe I'm gonna do a pork chop. I'm gonna grill that pork chop, because this. So another thing I talk about in the book is like trying to match the weight of things. And so it's just the idea of like, if it's cold out, you put on a coat. You don't go to the beach in a parka. And since this has a little bit more mouth feel, a little more weight to it, I can start putting some things on the plate that have a little more heft to it. And so I could even even take a really good piece of pork and throw it in a pan with some brown butter, and then maybe make a little pan sauce afterwards. Oops, sorry, my phone just told me that I gotta plug it in. Stupid thing. Apparently this takes a lot of batteries. Where was I? I was making pork.
Yeah.
And, oops. And now I'm trying to wreck everything. Sorry, technical difficulties. Nothing makes you feel older than like playing around during a Zoom meeting, like, oh, I gotta fix this. But we were talking about wine, though, weren't we? Sorry.
Pork chop with butter and with some other stuff.
And so here's another thing. The reason that this is getting into my brain is that a lot of times when I'm cooking pork, I like to throw fruit at it, like apples or peaches or any apricots, like doing a little kind of garnished salad on pork is great. Chris, and this has a lot of those.
You know what Jeff and I did the other day, which was actually pretty fun? We grilled some pork chops and then made a rhubarb apple chutney that had mustard and curry powder in it, and and like red onion. And I could see that actually being awesome with this wine.
So another thing that we do when we're preparing for wine is we're thinking about acidity levels. We're thinking about mouth feel and weight. But like, what flavors do you want to put on that plate that aren't there yet? Like, when I think of pan searing some pork with brown butter. I don't think well, actually, I don't think I want to throw lemon at that. Like I wouldn't want to have the Sauvignon Blanc. It just doesn't feel right. But I want this because it's got more heft and it has all those stone and tropical fruits in there. Like,
for sure.
So there's another sort of idea of like how to approach food and wine pairing from a sort of practical flavor standpoint. It's not, you don't have to know what the pH of the wine is to know that it tastes like that, and that you want to put other things that are either of the same flavor or on a thing that wants those same flavors.
Right. Yeah, totally.
For some reason, you know what I want to do?
What?
I want to get a Canadian bacon and pineapple pizza and try this with it.
Ooh.
Just saying. It's a polarizing pizza. I know it's polarizing. Some people are anti.
No.
But there's something about I want a pineapple that's been kind of caramelized a little bit with this wine. And it's the first thing that came to my mind. So if anybody else has a recipe that involves caramelizing a pineapple, let me know.
No, that sounds great. Oh, I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we solved that one. So okay, we got linguine with parsley, lemon, prawns, and whatnot with the Oliane. We got a caramelized pineapple, ham, sort of Hawaiian style pizza with Le Pearl. Let's go to our rosé, the L'Égerie. This is 2020, so this is the first vintage of last year of 2020 that we're releasing upon the world here.
Mm-hmm.
This is Grenache and Mourvedre. So the actual percentages, not that it matters, 65% Grenache, 35% Mourvedre. It's a dry style, sort of Provence style rosé, if we were to say that, for as far as Washington producers trying to mimic other styles of rosé made around the world. But this definitely has a lot more fruit. So in rosé in general, there's just a broader expanse, I think, of the kinds and types of fruit you get as far as aroma and flavor molecules or compounds. And but it's still a very fresh, lively wine. But Chris, what are some of the things like rosé? I think it's kind of a bridge wine too. Like you can do a wide range of food with it. But what are some of the things that you think about when you come across dry style rosé?
First, I think about all those bottles of Boone Strawberry Hill that I drank in college, and how I was not well served by them. Probably made some mistakes because of that wine. Wine in air quotes. I think that the first thing I want to say about this wine is that they make 1 billion bottles of rosé in Provence every year, and there's a reason they do, because it's delicious, and this is of that same ilk. Dry in style, but full of flavors that we all like. Like there's nothing off-putting about this wine at all. Not that that's the high mark of winemaking. Just saying that that this is the kind of wine that makes me want to get drunk. Can I say that? That might be the highest compliment I can give to a wine, because generally speaking. Now, what am I going to cook? You know what's going to happen with this wine? If I was, say, my wife and child were off away doing a thing, and I was batching it for a night, I'd probably go through 3/4 of this bottle and go like, "Oh, I forgot to cook dinner," and I'd make a great omelet, and it would be great with this wine.
Omelet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Omelets and rosé. Like generally, like omelets, you think about doing sparkling wine with.
Yeah, I think of champagne.
But like, for some reason, when I think about like brunch is like, maybe it's the days I spent bussing tables at the country club, because they always would garnish the omelets with a bunch of fruits, like a bunch of strawberries and grapes and stuff. And for some reason, that sort of experience has imprinted on me the idea that when I'm having an omelet, that having a little fruit salad on the side is fancy and acceptable, because I don't know, it just is. I'm sure that I'll talk to my therapist tomorrow about this and figure it out for reals. But hey, the hot water heater's making noise again. Can you hear that?
No, I can't.
Sounds like, really? Because to me, it sounds like a F-18 taking off.
Interesting. We're in Seattle, and Boeing is a thing, so we're used to that.
Maybe you filibuster for a minute while this
Well, Philip, no, absolutely. Yeah, rosé is, when I think of rosé, I always it's funny that you started this whole conversation about the drastic uh Stellenbosch Chenin Blanc or steam pairing with your anchovies and or sardines. Like when I think of rosé, the first thing I want is a piece of grilled toast with olive oil on it and some grilled sardines
Nice.
on or something, and some sort of aioli or something that has some weight to it. But um, yeah,
Sitting outside, having, oh, see, I managed to forget that tomatoes exist until they're ripe again. But like, I want to have some panzanella with this rosé. Does that make sense?
yeah,
Like,
for sure.
uh, that sounds good because sometimes when you make a panzanella, you throw some other stuff in there besides the tomatoes, but you wouldn't have to because it's in the wine. Yeah, I
Mm,
I
totally.
can't wait for a ripe tomato because the
Yeah.
garbage we get now is just it looks good. Hey, they're heirloom tomatoes. They're really expensive. I should buy them. Then you get them home. And you're like, no, they're not good yet. Why did I spend all that money on these crap tomatoes?
Oh, for sure.
Um, so I'm gonna vote for panzanella because like, oh man, or just like, or uh like prosciutto, like Parma prosciutto, like something like really thin sliced, salty ham sounds great with this too. I would
For,
totally destroy some prosciutto if we had some. We
for
might
sure.
have some downstairs in the kitchen.
Well, there
But
you go.
yeah, because this wine is not sweet, but
Right.
it's full of fruit flavors, and I kind of like the idea of throwing a little salty uh, ham in my mouth.
I love it. Oh, I love it.
So
That's
good,
man. That's
good
all.
job making wine, Avennia. Hey, is this when I get to show you my Avennia tattoo?
I know. Oh, really? You have one? That's impressive. I wish I could take. I wish I could take credit for it, but Chris and John and Jared, they do all the magic. Well, hey, this is great. I'm so glad. I'm so glad to have you. Like not only a wealth of knowledge, but like a humble wealth of knowledge to ask these kind of questions to. But at this point, we're 5:15 right now. So if anyone who is here has questions for Chris Horn or for anything about food and wine pairing that you want answered by the professional that is Chris Horn, now is your time. So hey, Renee looks like she
Yeah.
has a question.
Where's
Thank you.
Renee?
Hi, Chris. I really enjoyed your rotting fish trash anecdote from the time that you made a mistake. And so my question to you is, have you ever experienced that in reverse, where a chef, sommelier, or traditional wine knowledge says, don't pair this wine with this type of food, and you're like, stand back, watch this, and actually worked, or have been present when someone did something like that? And what was the situation if that did happen?
A couple things pop into mind, but first is like there are certain wine pairing ruts we get into, especially in the northwestern salmon season. I used to always tell everybody, do not pair tonight's salmon special with another Pinot Noir or Gamay Noir.
Mm.
And so I've seen some things happen there. But the thing I most advocate is, God, this is gonna make me feel old again. Remember when we used to eat ahi tuna, like the steaky ahi tunas? We just sear it really, really rare.
Yeah, yeah.
Merlot and ahi tuna are a great pairing, and I still can't figure out why.
What?
It
Really?
just, I know it's stupid, and I I don't know why it works. There's just something about like a steaky ahi tuna with a properly made Merlot that kind of tastes like, you know, chocolate covered cherries. It doesn't, yeah, even I say it out loud, it sounds terrible, but for some reason it works. Um, that is one of the food and wine pairing things that I've done that is bonkers. And um, other things that don't really make sense. Onions are, if they are the star of a dish, a floral, full-bodied Gewürztraminer does the trick, and I don't know why. There's a restaurant in Seattle called Nell's, and he does a onion tart at the height of onion season, and for some reason, a beautiful Gewürztraminer always does the trick with that dish. So there are these outliers where you're like, this should not make sense, but that's kind of the fun, is we're looking for those things. And a lot of times it's something I'm clicking, go, well, that makes sense because of that part of that element of the wine. Like, cheese is hard. Like, we have a robust cheese program, and occasionally you'll find that cheese and wine don't really get along that great. And so beer and cheese, it does. And so, like, when you have a super difficult cheese, sometimes going to the fridge and going, do I have something like a Trappist ale or something that I can, so the surprises are when you kind of give up on a thing and go to a different beverage, or like when we paired the baked brie with the lait, just because we couldn't get that Vouvray that we always like to get with that dish. So there are ways to play, and I think that something to take in consideration. There are wines that we're getting now that we never got before. Wines from the Republic of Georgia or Czechoslovakia or Slovenia, and a lot of these grapes that we're seeing are hard to pronounce, and don't really have a flavor metaphor that comes easy to mind. So orange wines and tartar is a thing that I did not expect to be so great every time. But sometimes you want a red wine mouthfeel with white wine flavors, and that's when orange wines kind of come into play. Does that answer the question? Like, sometimes
I was just thinking about the opposite of that situation. Like, one of my favorite. So when I worked at Purple with Chris and was doing pairings with specials and with some of the food on them, one of my favorite pairings I did was actually kind of the opposite situation of that. It was a red wine with white wine characteristics, and it was a lamb tagine, and I paired the Dornfelder. It was like a German Dorn or something, a German Dornfelder with it, which was an off-dry red wine, but it had a florality that reminded me of Gewürztraminer or some of those like off-dry white wines from Alsace that worked with like the like aromatics and like there's golden raisin in the dish. I think like something that like spoke to me in as far as florality, and like it was the same kind of thing, but totally opposite. Like floral red wine with a little bit of sweetness that worked.
Or that one Syrah, I think it was made by two vintners that went with the lobster mac and cheese, but no other Syrah ever did. Just that one wine, that one vintage. Like sometimes it's something like,
yeah. Sometimes you don't, and this brings me to, it's one of the points you make in the book too, that like at the end of the day, so much of this is experience. So much of this is just just trying things out. It's you can't discover things from a purely educational, like theoretical viewpoint. Like sometimes you just have to try things. You just have to put some stuff in your mouth and see what happens.
So that's the advice. It's in the book. Is if it sucks, you've got another bottle or 12 that you can open. And that bottle that didn't work, think about that bottle and think about what you're going to cook the next night to go with that bottle that you just tasted. So you can actually do this without wasting any wine. You're not pouring anything down the drain. You're just picking another bottle up and trying that one. And then tomorrow night, maybe figure out what you're going to do with that thing.
Totally. And I think that's an important thing to talk about as far as as far as this book, as far as Cooking Cork. The main goal of this book is to give you a wine wardrobe. So the idea is, I think is it 12, Chris? Is it 12?
It worked out being 12, but in actuality, if you count the things in the beginning, it's more like 15, but whatever.
So
12,
yeah. Like 12 to 15 different styles of wine. So it's not even exact producers or exact styles or exact like bottlings of wine, but it's styles of wine to always have on hand, so that you have the ability to try to pair food with these wines. And I think it's such an awesome thing to have just like ready to go, because you never know when you have a dish that you think like, oh, this is going to be great with some really lean style white wine, and then all of a sudden you throw a red wine at it. I was actually thinking about one of the coolest contrast pairings, and you kind of mentioned this before, the idea of not just deciding wines that match flavor profiles or aroma profiles or structural profiles with the actual dish that you're eating, but that are actually contrasting, something that adds something totally different or something totally new to the dish. And one of the examples I have is we did a Piedmont dinner, and there was a pasta dish. It was like a raviolo, so one single pasta that was an egg yolk, like it was an egg raviolo with a lemon ricotta filling, and you paired a northern Piedmont red wine with it, something that was like tannic, super acidic. It had red fruit, so it had like, you know, berries and plum and things you would associate with red wine, paired with this lemon ricotta egg pasta dish, which I would have thought, oh, this is a white wine dish for sure, but it was a contrast pairing and something that you never would have assumed would work. And contrast pairings are some of the hardest things to do. And so, like, what is that for you? Like, how is that something you were like, oh yeah, let's give that a try? That I think that'll work.
Was it wasn't a green? It was either a Grignolino or a Fresa.
It wasn't.
I think that
it was.
I think. Okay, so the Grignolino is a high acid, high tannin, lighter bodied red, and it's one of those weird tools in the toolbox that doesn't get used a lot. But I wanted something to mellow the fat of the cheese, so I needed something tannic. But there's not a lot of tannic white wines out there in the world, and so I think that's what got me down that road. And when you think about the cuisine of Piedmont is one of the few parts of Italy that doesn't have any connection to the ocean, and so the food is really based in agriculture, beef, that kind of thing. And so, but you think about the wines of Piedmont are a vast majority of the red. They do have some charming white wines as well, but they're on the map because of Nebbiolo. And so it's sort of knowing that, like, one of the more famous Piedmontese dishes is vitello tonnato, where you got tuna and meat on the same plate with a real rich sauce oftentimes. And Barolo kind of works with that stuff, and it doesn't make sense. Tuna and Nebbiolo. Oh, but when you look at the rest of the plate and you see all the fat and you see the meat, you're like, oh, that's what's happening, is the tannins are binding with the fat and keeping things kind of clearing the smoke, as it were, from the tannin and the fat. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and so that's a lot of times too, when you're approaching food and wine pairing, you're thinking about the origin of the food and thinking about the wines that are grown in that region, and that's also a pretty easy cheat, is if you're making something that is from southern Italy, you might want to grab some wine from southern Italy to see if that's gonna be the thing that works. And there's that phrase that if it grows together, it might go together.
Yeah.
Which I always feel like a little rhyming sometimes to me feels like trying too hard.
Yeah, but it's one of the things that it's so overused and so well used at the same time. Like, I've never come across an opportunity where that's not the case, where that's like, oh no, that doesn't make sense. No, it always makes, like, it's a good thing to go by. It's a good rule to go by, and then expand upon that. Yeah.
Sort of like having Sancerre and goat cheese. Well, they're produced like right next to each other.
Yeah.
And for some reason, over the centuries, that's worked out pretty well.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, is there anyone else who has a question for Chris Horn here before we sign off and move on to the other parts of our day? No,
I don't want to go back to work, so if anybody else wants me to talk for a while.
Chris, hey, a question that popped up in the chat was now that Purple Seattle is open, how does one go about dining there, getting a reservation? Like, are you doing reservations? Is it walk-in?
Yes.
What's the process right now for dining at Purple Seattle?
So we're still not back to our normal selves. We are at about half capacity. The menu isn't quite as robust as it used to be, because we're not. When you have a giant restaurant, you can have a giant menu. It works out. When you have a smaller restaurant, you have to do things a little bit differently. And instead of having 100 wines by the glass right now, I only have like 40. So it's a little different. And instead of doing flights right now, I'm doing duos, because I think that you can actually learn something from tasting a Washington Sauvignon Blanc next to a New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So things are just a little different, but definitely go online and book online, just because everything's spaced out. The reservations are it's a little harder just to stroll in and get a table, because we just don't have as many tables. And actually, I secretly love it because it feels safe, and it just feels nicer. I don't know. We'll see if we keep this way. But also, a new thing that we've done is the upstairs. I converted it into a little bit of a wine store / wine lounge. So if you just want to come in and hang out and have a bottle of wine, we've sort of set it up to be conducive to that sort of thing.
Cool. Oh, that's awesome. And lastly, so if people are interested in getting this book, this Cook and Cork book, I actually had one of our members here who just chatted, said they got the last one on Amazon. So sorry.
Probably.
Sorry.
Yeah, I think I have probably 5 cases left. And so we stopped pushing it. We are selling it at our wine store shop in Wallingford. You can come here, Purple Cafe downtown, and get one. But if you're watching this, I'll probably just give it to you, because it's a book that we wrote that we just want people to read and use, and so oftentimes I'll just hand it to you and say thanks for being interested in food and wine pairing, because it does make your life better, tastier. Things taste better, living better. And also, the halibut recipe in there is great.
Yes.
Very simple. It's a technique
thing.
There's a lot of
recipes in there, not just halibut, but there's some awesome recipes in there.
Yeah, the short rib one I did like 17 times during the pandemic, because it's what were we going to do besides sit at home and braise?
Right. Exactly. This is great. Well, hey, Chris, thank you so much for spending this time with us and wine pairing. For everyone else, thank you. If you are interested in this, I will also post, when I do the fact check sheet and unanswered question sheet, as a follow-up on our website, on our blog posts. I'll make sure that you have a way to get a hold of this book if you're interested in Cook and Cork. If you're in the area, please go to Purple Seattle and any of the heavy restaurant groups to support them and to experience food and wine pairing in a great way. But Chris, thanks so much, man. It's always great to see you. I learn everything. I learn something every time I talk to you, and it's not even close. And Mario Lopez, thanks for representing.
Yeah, he's the wind beneath my wings. What can I say? Thanks to my kid for setting that up on my phone for me.
Yep, Silas, you are a genius.
He's a genius. He's evil. Did Patty have a question? Because something popped up on the thing real quick that was.
Patty was wondering about how to get a reservation or how to dine. So
yeah, okay, yeah. Just hit the website. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks.
So just so you know, Patty, I am here on Thursday and Friday nights.
Oh, good.
If you want to come see me, because I am in other locations in the restaurant group other nights of the week. So come downtown on a Thursday or Friday. Thursday, pretty sleepy still. So
Thursday's where it's at.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, man. Well, thank you so much. It's good to see you, and we'll talk again soon.
Cheers.
Else, we'll see you next week when we talk to Erica Orr, who's awesome, and
she's great. Her Shannon Blanc rules. She's awesome. Yeah.
Shannon Blanc for days. It's gonna be cool. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. If you want to unmute, say goodbye. I always love hearing your voices, and say goodbye to Mario Lopez.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you, Chris. This was great. And I will come on Thursday with my daughter.
Awesome.
Right. I'll be here.
Awesome.